The front lines were a vision of desolation, a scarred landscape testament to the relentless conflict between humanity and a foe beyond their understanding. Trenches, haphazardly carved into the alien soil, sprawled across the terrain like the veins of a dying leaf, serving as the only barrier between the soldiers and the onslaught of a hyper-advanced enemy. Nick huddled in one such trench, the cold mud seeping through his uniform, a constant companion to the bone-deep chill that had settled within him. Around him, the remnants of his platoon shared silent, knowing looks, each man a mirror of despair and determination. The air vibrated with the power of the bombardment, a cacophony of sound that was now the soundtrack of their lives. Explosions tore through the air with merciless regularity, the ground beneath them trembling as if in fear. The smell of ozone, sharp and biting, mingled with the acrid scent of burning metal, painting a vivid picture of the war's destructiveness. Nick peered over the edge of the trench, his eyes scanning the horizon. The enemy was out there, hidden behind a veil of firepower that seemed inexhaustible. He thought of his family, of the world he had left behind, now galaxies away from this desolate battlefield. The thought was a small comfort, a fleeting escape from the grim reality that surrounded him. An explosion, closer this time, sent shockwaves through the trench, rattling his very bones. Nick flinched, the sound too close for comfort, a reminder of the fragility of their makeshift shelter. Dust and debris rained down upon them, a bitter rain that spoke of destruction. "Their tech, it's beyond anything we've got," muttered Jenkins, a fellow soldier, his voice barely audible over the din. His words were a simple truth, an acknowledgement of the enemy's superiority, a race that wielded technology as a weapon of unimaginable power, seemingly bent on humanity's extinction. As the bombardment intensified, Nick found himself reflecting on the war's toll, the friends lost, the countless battles fought, and the enemy that remained as elusive as ever. Each day was a struggle for survival, a desperate bid to hold the line against an adversary that seemed invincible. Yet amidst the despair, there was a glimmer of defiance within Nick, a stubborn refusal to yield. He had seen too much, lost too much, to give in now. "We hold," he whispered to himself, the words a mantra against the fear that threatened to consume him. As the explosions moved momentarily away, granting a brief respite from the onslaught, Nick dared to hope. Hope that he might survive another hour, another day in this hell. It was a fragile hope, as tenuous as the ground on which they fought, but it was all he had. The relentless bombardment eventually moved on, trailing devastation in its wake, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like another aspect of the war's cruelty. Nick, crouched in the muddy trench, felt the sudden stillness press against him, a stark contrast to the constant din of explosions and gunfire. He wiped the grime from his face with a sleeve, the fabric stiff with dirt and sweat. The brief pause in the conflict offered no real peace, only a momentary lull in the endless cycle of violence. Yet it was within this silence that something shifted, a change imperceptible to anyone but Nick. Risking exposure, Nick crawled to the trench's edge, peering over with caution honed by months of survival. The no-man's land stretched before him, a desolate expanse marred by craters and the detritus of war. It was a landscape devoid of life, or so it seemed until movement caught his eye. There, amid the destruction, stood an alien soldier. The enemy they had fought so desperately was no longer an unseen force directing death from afar, but a tangible presence on the battlefield. The alien surveyed the damage with an air of detachment, its slender form outlined against the backdrop of devastation. Nick's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear and an unexpected surge of determination. Here was the enemy, the architect of so much loss, vulnerable and within reach. Nick knew what he had to do. Gripping his rifle, he took aim, the weight of the moment settling upon him with the gravity of all the lives lost. The alien seemed oblivious to the danger, its attention fixed on the scarred earth. Nick steadied his breath, aligning the sight with his target. Every fiber of his being focused on this singular act, a chance to strike back, to honor those who had fallen. With a pull of the trigger, the rifle kicked against his shoulder, the sound shockingly loud in the quiet. The shot found its mark, and the alien soldier collapsed, a stark figure against the pale ground. For a moment Nick could only stare, disbelief mingling with a fierce sense of accomplishment. He had done it, he had killed one of the aliens, a feat that seemed as impossible as the hope of ending the war. The significance of his action reverberated through the trench, a beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. His platoon mates, alerted by the shot, gathered around, their expressions mirroring Nick's mix of astonishment and newfound resolve. The word of Nick's achievement spread quickly, igniting a spark of defiance among the soldiers. If one alien could be killed, perhaps they were not so invincible after all. Nick's shot became a symbol of their resistance, a testament to the possibility of victory, however distant. As the bombardment resumed, its fury unabated, Nick and his platoon faced the onslaught with a renewed spirit. The fight was far from over, and the enemy remained a formidable force, but Nick's action had changed something fundamental. In the heart of every soldier who had witnessed the impossible, a glimmer of hope flickered to life. The trenches, a labyrinth of mud and despair, buzzed with a fervor not felt in months. Soldiers whispered Nick's name, their voices a mixture of awe and hope. The man who had done the impossible, who had killed one of the seemingly invincible aliens, walked among them, a living testament to the idea that the enemy could be defeated. Nick, for his part, felt a dissonance within him. He was no hero, just a soldier who had taken a shot that, by some twist of fate, had found its mark. Yet as he moved through the trenches, the looks he received from his comrades were transformative, casting him in a role he had never anticipated. Commanders sought his insight, intelligence officers debriefed him with an intensity that spoke volumes of the desperation for any advantage. The alien's body, recovered from no man's land under the cover of darkness, became a source of invaluable intelligence. Journalists poured over it, their findings disseminating through the ranks like wildfire. The enemy was not invincible, they had weaknesses, and now humanity knew it. Nick's solitary action had shifted the paradigm, igniting a flame of resistance across the human forces. Soldiers who had once spoken of survival now talked of victory. Strategies were reevaluated, tactics revised with a renewed focus on exploiting the vulnerabilities Nick's shot had exposed. Yet amid the strategic upheavals and the surge of morale, Nick found himself wrestling with the broader implications of his actions. He had become a symbol of hope in a war that had seemed hopeless, a bearer of a burden he was not sure he could carry. The faces of friends lost, the cost of this endless war, weighed heavily on him. The accolades felt hollow when set against the backdrop of so much sacrifice. Nick stood on the edge of the trenches, looking out over the scarred landscape, a soldier transformed by circumstance into something more. He understood now that his fight was not just for survival, but for all those who had fallen, for those who continued to stand beside him. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please be sure to subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel grow and helps us bring on new authors too.